We are resurrecting the ancient melodies of the Hebrew scriptures. They're actually embedded in the very same Hebrew Tanakh that you read today, and they've been hidden there for thousands of years. Now, I'm not talking about the traditional synagogue cantillation, which is beautiful in its own right, but this is something far more ancient. These are the ancient melodies that the Levitical choirs would have been singing in the tabernacle and in the temple.
We joined the project because we were musicians and we were learning biblical Hebrew, and we realized in the biblical Hebrew that there was vowel pointings and then there was extra marks, and we learned that those extra marks were music notes.
I wrote a song about the book of Amos, and now to learn that there's actual music for Amos, now I can hear how it was actually originally composed. So that's pretty much
why we joined the team.
Why we joined the Mizmorim team, the Psalm Project.
So it's difficult to explain, and there's so much more I could explain. And we do have a 45-minute explanation of how we came to this and all the grammar and digging into that stuff for those of you who like it on our website, yihior.org. The link will be below in the video description. But today I just want to break down the basics of what we found. So to understand how and why and when this music was lost, the first thing I need to explain is this idea of what the tav represents. So tav can mean seal or sign or covenant. It's the name of the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the Hebrew sages teach that in ancient times, the singular feminine ending kametz he was originally a tav, which makes a lot of sense when you understand Hebrew because all the other feminine endings are tav endings except for this kametz he. So they teach that when that tav was lost and replaced with this kametz he, that the kametz served to point us back to the tav. And that's exactly what pointed me back to this music. So that lost tav, let me tell you where I found that lost tav. I found it in a Hebrew manuscript, and you can actually view this same manuscript for yourself if you go to the University of Manchester website, the digital collections, and we're going to go ahead and put that link in the description for you so you can see it for yourself. Because if you look at the book titled HaSodot in chapter 7, you'll see that in verse 3 of chapter 7, there's this word tav. And you'll notice that it's the only word that's pointed on the entire page. And interestingly, there's no other word that this word could have been, and yet the scribe has chosen to point this word. And when I noticed that, I thought, there's a clue there. And remember, this is the book of secrets. It's literally called The Secrets. That's what HaSodot means. So I'm thinking, there's a reason why they chose to point this word. And as we will see, that single word pointed us back to this music, and the music is actually found in these little dots and dashes that accompany the text. Now, not in the nikudot, not in the vowels themselves, but in the te'amim, which are sort of blended in with the nikudot, okay, or the cantillation marks. And again, don't confuse this with the traditional synagogue cantillation, which is beautiful in its own right. This is something far more ancient. It goes back to the time of King David. It would have originally been taught and passed down from cantor to cantor. These musicians and singers would have been trained using these hand symbols, these chironomic gestures. And these gestures were then later codified into the te'amim. At the same time that the sages began to be concerned that all of these things might be lost, they made a written system to actually codify these notational values. But later, the actual deciphering key, the correlation to what symbols represented what notes was lost. And that's what we were able to actually rediscover. So this nikud here is a clue to look to the little dots and dashes in the Hebrew text to find the music. And if you look closely, this letter tav itself looks like a musical note. So that is really fascinating when you consider that this letter mimics a modern day Western musical note. And of course, it was written far before any Western music was ever encoded. So these are the ways Yah works together to point us back to the clues. So clue 1, the vowel point itself tells us where to find the music. And clue 2, the word itself in Hebrew, tav, means mark, but it also means music note. And clue 3, the letter tav also literally looks like a music note. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up.
What a wow moment that was to discover music.
in the text. The whole Tanakh can be sung.
But when you read this verse in HaSodot, what it actually says in English is, "And I saw an angel," or a messenger, "which went forth from the east as the rising sun, and he was signed or sealed by the living El. And he affirmed and cried out in a great voice to the four angels, those permitted to destroy the earth and seas. And he said, do no harm to the earth and to the sea or to the trees until I will give the tav," the mark or the music note, "upon their foreheads." Now, to have something on your forehead in Hebrew means to literally understand it, to comprehend it. It's sort of a poetic way of saying, that you know this thing. So this messenger is giving this hidden knowledge that has to do with music to the servants of Yah. This is just incredible. So here in Ezekiel, we have something even more compelling. It says, "Pass through the midst of the city, in the midst of Yerushalayim, and mark a tav on the foreheads of the people who are groaning and are mourning over all the abominations that are done in her midst." So again, this tav is a sort of seal of protection being placed on his servants, those who are crying out against the idolatry. Okay, and we're going to see this as a theme. So this is very clear and very strong. The connection is undeniably tied to this verse in HaSodot. So what do we see? What do these seals have to do with music? Well, they both tie back into HaSodot. And the music in chapter 14, particularly verses 1 through 3. So it's talking about this song, this new song, or actually renewed song, that these redeemed people, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, are singing as the Messiah is revealing himself to the nations. So this concept of a new song is actually very old, you see, because the rabbis wrote about this in the Midrash, that there were these 9 significant songs in the scriptures, and they believe this 10th song will be revealed when the Messiah reveals himself to the world. So here we have this Shir Hadash, this new song, and even the grammar, there's kind of a complicated explanation, but all of the other 9 songs are referred to in the feminine grammar in Hebrew, and the rabbis said that this 10th song will be in the masculine grammar, and that's exactly what we see here in HaSodot 14. We see the masculine grammar, Shir Hadash, a renewed song. Now, I want to relate this back over to a verse in Amos that talks about when the music of the temple was lost and why. Amos 5 is a rebuke, and it's a call to repentance. And at this point, Yah is just fed up with the way his people are keeping the feasts and the sacred music that was written and composed and preserved and faithfully performed day and night in the tabernacle and then later the temple. And it's just become this noise. He actually refers to it as this noise because of the idolatry, which is, of course, the same issue in Ezekiel. Remember, he's fed up with their idolatry. And here in HaSodot too, there's this image, this idol the whole world is whoring after. So now I'm reading now from Amos 5:23. It says, "Take away from me the noise of your songs and the melody of your stringed instruments. I will not hear, but let run down," and it says cHayim, like water, mishpat, of justice, okay, like righteous water, okay, and righteousness like an enduring stream. So these words are important. Okay, mishpat. Mishpat are Yehovah's judgments, right? His judgments are righteousness. So here, when we have this other parallel, when we look back into HaSodot, it says, "I heard this sound, which was like the sound of uprightness." So we have this sound, like the sound of many waters, okay? And the very sound Yehovah was pleading for back here in Amos, and indeed, based on the grammar, he's actually declaring that it's going to happen. This is a prophetic future tense. He says, "And righteousness will run down like an enduring stream." So back when the music was first taken away, and now it's in the same description given here in HaSodot, that this sound is being compared to water, which we know is all about purification and renewal. And it's being compared to righteousness, or it's actually being designated as the sound of righteousness. And so the same sound that he was calling for in Amos is now being heard as Messiah is revealing himself to his faithful ones, singing this renewed song. It's just incredible. So when the sages studied a scripture, we need to understand a concept called Pardes, the Peshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod meanings. And the Sod meaning is what we're mostly going to look at right now because this is the book of HaSodot. And this layer, Sod, or secrets, is the one that is going to point us back and tie all these things together. So we have all these things. We have the lost top, the lost music, the seal upon the foreheads of Yah's servants in the midst of idolatry, okay? Because they're the ones crying out against it. And then we have this renewed song, this sound of uprightness as the sound of many waters. And these verses all tie into one another. So during the time I'm discovering all of this, I'm also given this deciphering key this brilliant composer had discovered back in the 80s and applied, but not a lot was done with it. And now we have it and we're applying it and we get these amazing, just completely incredible melodies that just transport you back to ancient Israel. I mean, you can just smell the incense and hear the shofarot, and it's just incredible, really. It's such a privilege to be part of this project, this restoration of all things. Just incredible. All praise and glory to Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam. So the name of this project is Mizmorim cHayim, which means living songs or living melodies in Hebrew. And that's exactly what these songs are. If there's something about this project that excites you and inspires you and you'd like to find out more, or even get involved in helping to musically translate the scriptures from the Hebrew, don't be shy. Reach out.
Now we have an endless amount of work to do. The whole Tanakh can be sung. It gave us so much more meaning and purpose in our lives.
So we'd like you to check it out.
Because we need you. We need to grow a team of people dedicated to the Creator of heaven and earth and to the restoration of all things in these last days, especially His music and His praise. Shalom.